Well, everyone is still arguing over Hail Mary defense and Matt Eberflus's hot seat. The Chicago Bears have some serious injuries to address on the offensive line, where a lineup change could be in order out of necessity.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, we check in on the state of this Chicago Bears offensive line that could be missing as many as 2 starters on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals, depending on how the injury recovery goes this week. And they lost one of their top backups for the season on injured reserve on Tuesday. So some real concern about how well that group's going to be able to hold up in front of Caleb Williams after they really struggled against Washington. And that was even a little bit healthier for at least some of that game than they stand today moving forward. But we also need to talk about how, despite all of the criticism and stuff floating around, like, the Bears offense did still find a way to climb back into that game, and maybe we can still have some confidence in, Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift, and dare I even say Shane Waldron being able to have some success in spite of offensive line stuff. And then we got to talk about the rumors and the stuff that's come out about Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson reportedly being interested in the Bears job last year. Now everyone's ready to fire Matt Eberflus and hand Ben Johnson the keys to the city. And there's certainly plenty of merit to that, but I do want to slow down the hype just a little bit there too. But I think the bigger, more pressing, immediate issue is this Bears offensive line. Like, they're not going to fire Matt Eberflus today. They're not going to fire Matt Eberflus this week. They're not going to hire Ben Johnson today. They're not going to hire Ben Johnson this week. We can get to that in a little bit here. Right now, they got to get ready for the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. And you need your offensive line to perform better this week than they did last week against Washington. And that's going to be hard to do when they're nowhere close to healthy. So Braxton Jones leaves the game against the Commanders, and Karan Amagaji comes in and struggles pretty mightily. And the reporting we got from Ian Rappaport was that Braxton Jones, doesn't have a serious injury. The phrase was, he may miss a week or two, but it is not considered a major injury. Week to week is what NFL insider Ian Rappaport reported. So may miss a game or two, doesn't guarantee that he's out on Sunday against the Cardinals, but I think we should start planning for him to be out on Sunday against the Cardinals and be pleasantly surprised if he is able to go in that game. Also in that game, we lost Tevin Jenkins during that one and came back and then left again with this, what seemed to be the same kind of knee, shin, lower leg injury. And Bill Murray comes in, and after what seemed like just a few plays, Bill Murray leaves with a pec injury. So then Doug Kramer comes in at left guard, and you have Karan Amagaji and Doug Kramer as your left tackle and left guard. Not ideal, but also not out of the possibility that that's the lineup on Sunday against the Cardinals, because Bill Murray was placed on injured reserve. His season is done. The backup left guard that we saw play a really good half of a game earlier this season that we were all excited about what he could be, well, his season is over. And we don't really know where Tevin Jenkins stands or sits right now. The Matt Eberflus on Monday didn't have any update on the injury situation for him or Braxton Jones. But it's interesting that we got still like the NFL insider update on Braxton Jones, but we haven't gotten a lick of information about Tevin Jenkins, which maybe suggests that it's not major, but that it's really up in the air whether or not he's going to be able to play. Maybe there's nothing to say yet because they just got to see how the week goes. And so if Tevin Jenkins is a coin flip and Braxton Jones is a little less than a coin flip and probably more like, 30-70 or 20-80 odds that he's just most likely not going to play this week, that means you need a new starting left tackle and a new starting left guard against the Arizona Cardinals. Again, in a game where you're coming off of a game where your offensive line didn't play particularly well. So What are your options then? I mean, we know you could start Karana Magashi at left tackle and Doug Kramer at left guard. That's how you finished against the Commanders. That's the sort of the default option here. But you have to hope that you get some good continuing positive injury news during the week, because you have Larry Borom currently on injured reserve, and you have Ryan Bates currently on injured reserve. Now, Larry Borom practiced all of last week, and we thought he might get activated to play against the Commanders, maybe regretting not activating him against the Commanders. But if he was a full participant in practice last week, then he should be able to go this week. So in theory, if Braxton Jones can't go, you plug Larry Borom in as your starting left tackle, and you feel like that's a better option for you than the rookie third-round pick Amagaji, who struggled quite a bit against the Commanders. But then what do you do at left guard then? Is Ryan Bates healthy enough to come off of injured reserve? It's possible. I don't think we have a great sense of that. Certainly your best case scenario here is that Tevin Jenkins is healthy enough to play, and you got Borom at left tackle and Tevin Jenkins at left guard, and you only have to make one true change to your starting lineup here. But if Tevin Jenkins isn't able to go, and then depending on if Ryan Bates would probably be your next man up at left guard, but if he isn't ready to go, then do you go back to Doug Kramer at left guard, or do you consider, do you bump Nate Davis in at right guard and then move Matt Pryor over to left guard? Or I guess you could put Nate Davis at left guard, but that feels like a tougher ask here. Or, you could, I guess, play Larry Borom at left guard. He's played guard before in his career. You could start Amagaji at left tackle and Larry Borom at left guard if both Jones and Tevin Jenkins and Ryan Bates are all unable to go. Like, it feels like if Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins are both out, then Larry Borom's going to start at one of those two spots, and then you either start Karana Magaji or Doug Kramer at the other spot, depending on what spot you put Larry Borom in. I think, so obviously, like, best case scenario is Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins are both healthy, and you got your starting offensive line together. That's best case scenario. I think from there, your second best case scenario is Larry Borom at left tackle, Tevin Jenkins at left guard, and then your third best scenario is Borom and Ryan Bates at tackle and guard, and then once you get into Amagaji or Doug Kramer in your starting lineup, that's where you start to get really concerned about how that left side's going to hold up. And you can be sure that, Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals defense are going to be planning on attacking the Bears left side no matter who starts there, because if it's your starters, they're not 100%. And if it's your backups, well, it's backup players. And they've got, the rookie first-round pick Darius Robinson. They got the former first-round pick LJ Collier from the Seattle Seahawks. They've got Zaven Collins on one edge, Julian Okwara on the other edge. Like, it's not a top-tier pass rush in the NFL, but they can get after it a little bit, and they can give this Bears offensive line some trouble, especially if they blitz the way that Washington did last week, and kind of show everybody that there's a formula for confusing this Bears offensive line. So that's kind of concern number one for me heading into this week, how healthy the offensive line is going to be. And at least you feel like you got 3 or 4 different options here in terms of, like, maybe Braxton Jones is healthy, maybe Tevin Jenkins is healthy, maybe Larry Borom's healthy, maybe Ryan Bates is healthy, that between those 4 guys, can you get 2 of them this week? I like that odds better than counting on, one guy to come back this week when you kind of have 4 options there. We'll see exactly how that plays out, but we'll keep tabs on the Bears injury report all throughout the week here on the Locked On Bears podcast. I think what this makes me think about, though, is that the Bears offense was still able to play well in spite of, at the end of the game, I should say, in spite of how the offensive line struggled. That those last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter, the Bears offense came to light, even though their offensive line was struggling. And that's a sign that, hey, maybe they can figure things out, even if they're missing a couple starters on Sunday. So we'll kind of look at just how clutch Caleb Williams was, and maybe where we can find some semblance of optimism or hope about what they can still put together next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bilt. If you are a renter like me, you got to hate the feeling of seeing the rent check come out of your bank account every single month. But it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning with some serious rewards, because that's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, you pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. You can use those points to jet off on a dream vacation. You can put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay, with up to 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties all participating. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. So pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's JOIN, join, Bilt, BILT.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl to start earning points with your rent payments today. Even with this Bears offensive line playing quite poorly against the Washington Commanders, the Bears offense finally found a way to string some things together. Now, I'm not here to say they had a great game overall. They were bad for 3+ quarters, really. I mean, they scored a touchdown on the DeAndre Swift breakaway run at the end of the third quarter. That was about it till the final 10 minutes of the game. They couldn't get the passing game going with any sort of rhythm. They were sticking to the running game, but weren't really having those big plays to keep drives alive. Plus, you add in plenty of penalties along the way, and it just gets to be a messy offensive performance all around. Until your back's against the wall, you're running out of time in the fourth quarter, and you need plays. You need something to start working. And that's when Caleb Williams kicked it into gear. And I haven't really been able to get a sense of, like, what changed. Like, why was it all of a sudden, the Bears make a stop, the Commanders punt with 10.5 to go. The Bears take over on their own 15-yard line, and then they drive all the way down to the 1 before Doug Kramer fumbles, but still an 84-yard drive in about 4 minutes of game time, really kind of methodically working their way down the field without too much trouble from the opposing defense. And then they get the ball back again and do the same thing, 10-play, 62-yard touchdown drive, like back-to-back drives where all of a sudden, holy crap, the Bears offense looks really good. Where was that the first 3 quarters? I mean, yeah, they got into some no huddle and maybe they wore down the Commanders a little bit over the course of the game, but I haven't found like a perfect schematic answer as to what exactly started working, other than just like Caleb Williams stopped missing some guys, maybe settled in a little bit more, held his feet under him, and made some incredible throws. Like if you look back at that fourth quarter, what he was able to do there, it's striking just how much better he was then compared to the rest of the game. I actually went and found the split. So Caleb Williams, if you split it up, the start of that second to last drive, they get the ball with 10.5 to go. Caleb Williams' first pass attempt on that drive comes with 9.5 to go. If you look at the final 10 minutes of this game versus the first 50 minutes of this game, you can see exactly how clutch Caleb Williams was. In those final 10 minutes, he was 6 of 8 for 95 yards. Didn't have a passing touchdown in there, didn't have an interception, but that's still good for a passer rating of 114.1. 6 of 8 for 95 yards. Essentially drove them down for what should have been 2 scoring drives. One's a fumble with Doug Kramer, so that one doesn't count as a scoring drive, but on the other one, drove them down and handed off to Roschon Johnson and scored. Like those should have been 2 scoring drives, and it's not necessarily, you can blame him for the handoff, but I mean, come on, it's not necessarily Caleb's fault that the first drive didn't score. Compared to the first 50 minutes, 4 of 16 for 36 yards. That's a 25% completion percentage and just over 2 yards per pass attempt in the first 50 minutes of the game. And in the final 10 minutes, he's completing 75% of his passes for over 10 yards per pass attempt. I mean, it's just a ridiculous flip of the switch. In the moment when the Bears absolutely needed it the most, Caleb Williams was absolutely clutch in this game. And I think it's an oversimplification to say he purely did it all by himself. I mean, the receivers were open. They caught some tough catches, including that catch by DJ Moore where he took a hit at the end, but that was a brilliant throw from Caleb Williams, all while a blitzer comes unblocked right between the left tackle and the left guard to hit Caleb Williams hard. Like that is an individual effort from Caleb Williams that is special. That throw is special. The poise to stay in the pocket and deliver that throw and still be accurate, even if there wasn't a blitzer coming down his gullet. Like that was a tough throw between 2 defenders in coverage. It was kind of that cover 2 turkey hole that John Gruden used to talk about on Monday Night Football, right behind the cornerback, but outside in front of the safety, kind of in that corner. It's a beautiful ball that he threw and is super impressive and redeemed so much of the struggles he had earlier in that game. And similarly, like I don't want to just put it all on Caleb Williams here, but like DeAndre Swift, to his credit, found ways to make plays in the running game, even though the offensive line wasn't playing well. The 56-yard touchdown run felt like almost all DeAndre Swift. Like, he got through the line of scrimmage. The offensive line gave him the first, 3 or 4 or 5 yards, but then he made a nice move at the second level to set up Karana Magaji's block, and then it was his speed down the sideline. Like, that was DeAndre Swift creating more than his offensive line would give him. And he had a couple other nice runs late in this game in the fourth quarter. On one of those drives, he had a 22-yard run as well that he took off the right side where, again, he's making guys miss. He's beating defenders to the hole, and he's making plays. Like, two of the Bears' 3 longest plays in the game were DeAndre Swift runs. It was the breakaway touchdown, and then the DJ Moore pass, and then that DeAndre Swift run. Those were the 3 longest plays in offense for the Bears. Like, the running game, and specifically this running back, got going even when the offensive line wasn't necessarily giving him a ton of help up front there. So both your quarterback and running back found ways to manufacture offense. And when both players do that a little bit, don't you have to give Shane Waldron like some little amount of credit there? We don't how to split up the pie on credit there. It's the individual player making plays, yes, but like Shane Waldron had to call running plays, even though they're down 2 possessions in the fourth quarter. Well, I guess it was 1 possession in the fourth, but still, even though they're losing in the game, Shane Waldron continued to stick to the running game when he has a history of abandoning the running game. Like, he deserves whatever amount of credit you think that's worth. It's more than 0. He deserves more than 0 credit. Again, I'm not here to say like Shane Waldron had a great game and was some great offensive coordinator. No, but like, he does have some role in calling plays where Caleb Williams can throw that route to that player against that coverage and have an option for if the blitz comes through that quickly. Like, of course, Caleb deserves the vast majority of the credit, and Swift on his long runs deserves the vast majority of the credit. But like, the play call also had to have those players be in those positions to make plays. There's certainly a lot more offensive coordinating we need better from the offensive coordinator. We need better from the offensive line coach, et cetera, et cetera. But there's something there. And maybe the fact that there's something there in the fourth quarter against the Arizona Cardinals, after there had been plenty there in the previous 3 games, suggests that maybe this Bears offense hasn't completely turned back into a pumpkin, and that there's still a few seconds before midnight. And especially those clutch moments before midnight is when Caleb Williams is absolutely his best there. And so against the Arizona Cardinals, it doesn't mean I'm thinking the Bears are going to come in and put up another 35-point game and all problems will be solved on this Bears offense again. But Arizona ranks 24th in points allowed and 27th in yards allowed. They're in the bottom 3rd in run defense and bottom 3rd in pass defense. It's not a great Arizona Cardinals defense. It's not as terrible as like the Jaguars and the Panthers that the Bears saw, but it's not a great defense. So there should be some opportunities for the Bears to eventually figure something out against the Cardinals. I don't think the Bears are going to start hot just because they didn't against Washington either. I don't think they're going to come out and score 40 points. I don't think they're going to score early or often necessarily, but like, can they score enough to win the game? They had the ability to almost score enough to win the Commanders game. In theory, they should have the ability to score enough to beat the Arizona Cardinals, depending on how healthy that offensive line is. But I think it's a good reminder, like, hey, as much as we are mad at the coaching staff and want change and accountability and everything after the loss to the Commanders, like, they're still 4-3. They're still a decent football team. There's still a lot of ball game left in this season. And that's where, like, I want to slow down the Ben Johnson hype just a little bit. And if you sort of missed the Ben Johnson story, I'll explain why so many Chicago Bears fans are talking about the Lions offensive coordinator right now and ready to hand him the head coaching job today. And I think, hey, in the big picture, you're probably right, but like, let's slow down just a little bit on that. And also, like, let's not pretend Ben Johnson is some surefire, never going to fail head coaching candidate here either. So we'll kind of look at the Matt Eberflus hot seat and the Ben Johnson interest in the head coaching role next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet hits. So you'll get the winnings for your $5 bet, and then they'll add another $150 in winnings on top of that. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on all of the football action as well. If over the course of this Bears-Cardinals game, you get a hunch that the Bears are going to make a comeback or that the Bears are going to extend their lead or whatever you're feeling, you could bet it in the FanDuel Sportsbook app. The Bears are 1.5-point underdogs on the road right now. Money line is -108, and the over-under is set at 44.5. If you place a $5 bet on any of those, you hit it. they're going to add $150 in bonus bets on top of your winning. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Seems like most Chicago Bears fans are ready to fire Matt Eberflus and hand Ben Johnson the head coaching job and put Caleb Williams in Ben Johnson's hands and say, yes, you are the head coach who's going to take this team to the next level. And don't get me wrong, I am always here for looking ahead to the future and being excited about better and wanting better for your football team and not settling for mediocre. Because I generally agree with the sentiment that Matt Eberflus limits the ceiling of this team and that the team would be better off with a different head coach for the long-term future. But A, they're not going to fire him during the season. B, I don't think they're going to fire him this offseason at all. And C, I'm not perfectly sold that Ben Johnson is this perfect can't miss head coach that if you don't get him, someone else is, and he's going to run away and win Super Bowls and Super Bowls and Super Bowls for whatever team he becomes a head coach of. There's more to this than that. So I kind of want to break those down in the different steps here. One, first of all, the Bears have never fired a head coach ever during their season. They have a 4-3 record. They're a winning football team. The entire organization still believes they can make the playoffs and all that stuff. No one in Chicago is panicking. No one in Chicago is jumping ship. There's certainly a lot of controversy right now, and it's a bit of a firestorm, but this current firestorm around the Bears is category 1. You know, like if we're taking on like hurricane scale, like category 1 to category 5, like this is pretty light. Matt Eberflus survived a mid-season category 4 hurricane last year when Chase Claypool was questioning the coaching staff, when your defensive coordinator technically resigned for mysterious personal family reasons that we still don't have answers to. Your running backs coach was fired for some sort of human resources conduct issue that we still don't know a lot of details of. Like you had coaches leaving, you had player mutiny, you had a 1-4 starter, and you were losing games, you're getting blown out, you blew a huge first half lead. Like everything was going wrong last season at this time for Matt Eberflus, and he survived that. Like they're not going to fire him right now during the season, and I don't think they're going to fire him in the offseason either. I really think it would take something drastic. It would take something catastrophic, right? It would take, another coordinator controversy or scandal, right? I mean, it would take something above and beyond just the wins and losses in football games. Blowing a win against the Washington Commanders is not going to get him fired. Blowing 3 more wins like that might not get him fired. If he goes 0-6 in the division and the Bears, if the Bears don't win another game this season, could that be enough? I guess that would be drastic if they didn't win another game this season, but that doesn't seem likely. They're probably going to beat the Patriots, might even beat the Cardinals. They'll win a couple of division games. Like wherever they'll finish, they're not going to lose every other game the rest of the year. Like it would take something extreme. If they were going to fire Matt Eberflus, they would have done it last offseason when they fired both of his coordinators. Ryan Poles doubled down and endorsed Matt Eberflus and says, this is my guy. Ryan Poles still backs Matt Eberflus. Those two are really, really tight. And so Ryan Poles is not going to make that decision unless there's some overwhelmingly strong evidence. But if it's just a feeling of like, the Bears came up just a little bit short again, that's not enough for this team to move on from Matt Eberflus. I both don't want to crush your dreams, but also don't want to get your hopes up. Don't want you to get your hopes up so that you're disappointed when they don't fire him. Like in all likelihood, Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron will both be back next season. I don't think they're going to let Matt Eberflus fire a coordinator, an offensive coordinator again 2 years in a row, right? I think this staff, when they decided that they were going to keep Eberflus and hire new coordinators and draft Caleb Williams, they said, we are keeping this group together and not trying to create so much turnover and turmoil for that rookie quarterback early in his career. I think they might be better off changing coaches. They should have changed coach last year. They might still end up being better off changing coaches this offseason, but there's a difference between maybe what I think is best for them to do and what I predict they will end up doing. So that brings us to Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, because NFL insider Albert Breer is perhaps the most plugged into the Chicago Bears organization among the insiders. I can tell you I have seen that firsthand at the NFL Scouting Combine and at the Senior Bowl. Albert Breer is very chummy with Ryan Poles. He was very chummy with Luke Getsy before Luke Getsy got fired. He's very chummy with Matt Eberflus. Those guys like Albert Breer. And so when Albert Breer has information about the Chicago Bears, you can trust that majority of the time it's coming from a pretty good source. And so Albert Breer was a guest on, I think it was ESPN Chicago. I apologize if I get the credit wrong here, and was asked about Eberflus's job security and stuff. And Albert Breer revealed that Ben Johnson was, quote, definitely connected to the Chicago job last year. And went on to say that there were some people who thought that was the one he wanted. Like this idea that Ben Johnson, turned down the Washington Commanders job, and he's been kind of, picky about what head coaching gig he's going to take when he does leave Detroit. That's why he's still stayed as their offensive coordinator, because he's waiting for the right opportunity for himself. And Albert Breer is saying the Chicago Bears could have been that right opportunity for Ben Johnson. It's not saying it was a sure thing going to happen, but that there was a lot of murmuring that had the Bears fired Matt Eberflus, Ben Johnson potentially would have been willing to take the Bears job when he wasn't willing to take the Commanders job or some of the other jobs that became available. So, of course, now you have every Chicago Bears fan photoshopping Ben Johnson into Bears gear and wishing for Matt Eberflus to be fired and replaced by Ben Johnson so that Ben Johnson can do with Caleb Williams what Ben Johnson has done with Jared Goff. And I totally and completely understand the interest in Ben Johnson. But I also feel like we get so caught up in the grass always being greener with the other coach when we've been through this in Chicago and we've seen it elsewhere in the NFL, that hiring the really smart, really good offensive coordinator doesn't always work as a head coach. The same is true for defensive coordinators, but it's important to remember here for Ben Johnson, yes, no doubting, he's doing a great job with the Detroit Lions offense. They are great. He's a great offensive coordinator, but not all great offensive coordinators are great head coaches. Head coaches have to do a lot of different things beyond just offensive coordinating. And I feel like we saw this with Matt Nagy, and we even saw this with Mark Trestman. Not that Ben Johnson is going to be either of those two guys, but we all thought Matt Nagy was going to come from Kansas City and be a great offensive coordinator and do with Mitch Trubisky what he was doing with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. That was the whole point of hiring Matt Nagy. And even when you brought in Mark Trestman, right? He was going to unlock Jay Cutler. But we found that a really great offensive coordinator into a head coach role has more than just offensive coordinating at his disposal. And sometimes that can become a problem here. Maybe Ben Johnson can handle the head coaching duties and be a great head coach. We'll see, but we don't know that. Just like we don't know with any coach you could hire. So to sit here and say Ben Johnson could be the savior of the franchise and the Bears have to do whatever it takes to make sure you get this guy because he's a can't-miss head coach candidate, he's a great offensive coordinator. But there's no such thing as a can't-miss head coach. Just look at, Mike McDaniel with the Miami Dolphins was a great offensive coordinator and still had really good offenses in Miami, but can't get them over the top and injuries, whatever. But people are having some of those questions about Kyle Shanahan, even in Washington or in San Francisco. There have been a lot of examples of really great offensive coordinators who are supposed to be the hot young thing that go on to be head coaches and run into varying levels of success with varying levels of issues along the way. And just because he's a great offensive coordinator doesn't guarantee he's a great head coach. Maybe he will be. And maybe it's well worth the upgrade and worth the risk for the Bears to try it out and go after him. But you can also see where Ryan Poles says, okay, devil I know in Matt Eberflus versus devil I don't know in Ben Johnson. If Eberflus is getting you a certain distance, do you say, well, 9-8 isn't good enough, so we got to go to Ben Johnson and risk going backwards, but with the chance of maybe going forwards? And that's why they're paid the big bucks to make these NFL decisions that, personally, I don't think Matt Eberflus is the right head coach for the Chicago Bears, and I think a change is necessary. I just hesitate to just instantly assume Ben Johnson is the best candidate and is the only guy that the Bears should consider there. There's plenty of other head coaches that go through the cycle that, Bobby Slowik from Houston, or certainly Mike Vrabel from Tennessee is still out there. If Kevin Stefanski from the Browns becomes available, there's more to this conversation than just fire Eberflus, give Ben Johnson the job. Maybe. But you can at least go through the whole process and see what your options might be. And none of us are sitting in on that interview. And maybe the interview tells you something about how any of these guys would be head coaches differently than they would be offensive coordinators. And coming off underneath the leadership of Dan Campbell and then trying to run your own team as Ben Johnson might be a little bit of something that he hasn't had to go through before. And we don't know how well he would handle that job. And so that's where I just hesitate to say this is not a defense of Matt Eberflus at all, but just hey, let's not just pretend the next guy is going to be the perfect guy when we keep thinking the next guy is going to be the good one, and we still haven't found him. So, a little fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you can't get fooled again, right? It's a George Bush reference from early 2000s. Anyway, hopefully we don't have to do any more head coach talk or, candidate talk for a while here. But the Ben Johnson thing was so hot and could kind of tie it back in to where the Bears are right now. So that's why I wanted to make sure we addressed it on the podcast today. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day. Coming back tomorrow for Crossover Thursday with Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals, bringing you everything you need to know about the Chicago Bears opponent. We'll go back and forth on the matchup and everything you need to know for the game. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis, and the best way to make sure that every single day you get another opportunity to bear down.